Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome along everyone. Now anybody who knows me will know that I like clocks, and the last 3 or 4 years I've been adding to my collection of clocks in the house. And I especially love mechanical clocks. But what it is about mechanical clocks is the engineering gone into how they all work, which is fascinating. But I do like clocks in general. You've seen me make a few clocks on the channel in the past, usually with pyrography and everything. But I've bought some more movements, and I've bought 3 of these. But the difference is with these ones is that I've gone for small hands. Now that hand there is going to be at a radius of 40 millimeters. So it's going to need a clock face of around about 80 to 90 millimeters. And I thought I'd share my thought processes as I go along. Now I don't want just some ordinary plain face, so I'm going to try first of all a segmented face to house this on, and then try and build something else up around it. And I really want this to be some form of like a mantle clock, so that it sits somewhere freestanding, not on a wall. Now I've found myself some oak offcuts. They're all slightly different thicknesses. Some of them are angled, some of them are different widths. And I reckon out of these that I can cut pieces which are about 20 millimeters wide. And I've used my spreadsheet again. So I know my clock hands need an 80mm diameter. What I'm doing on my spreadsheet here is I'm going by 100mm diameter. I want to go for 12 segments, and I'm going by my 20mm segment thickness. And this is telling me that I need to set my angle at 15 degrees each cut. This is now set at 30 degrees. I also need to cut the lengths on the outside at 26.8mm. And obviously that's extremely accurate, so it just gives me a guide of where I need to be. At least that way I can set my guide up on here for around about 27 millimeters. This first segment I'm doing is going to be for the outer ring, and I may well then carry on doing some smaller segments so that I can build up several rings, turn them down and join them all together. My next job is to sand and glue these rings up. I may well even cut another third ring to fit in there, but I'll see how they finish up when they're glued up. Now I've made 3 of these rings in the end. Just seemed too small having that one. And the idea is now is that I want each of these rings to fit inside the other one to create one flat plate like that. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to start with the smallest one. I'm going to stick this on this waste block this way. I'm just going to tack the outside with hot glue. Then I can then true up the inside. Once that's done, I can tack the inside and I can true up the outside to the size that I want it. Once I've done that, I can then put this one probably onto another waste block, do the same, but so this inner ring will then fit around this new trued up outside that can then be glued back together. Now I've turned these all so that they fit together. When I was doing these inner rings, I was doing the cuts so they were concave, and as you can probably see on this one, there is a little bit of a gap there, but it is a nice tight fit on this side. So this will become the front. And to finish off, what I shall probably do is I will end up probably creating a bung to go in on this piece as well. But doing it the way I've lined up here. So I'll glue these up and then leave them overnight to fully dry. This has now been left overnight to dry. You can see from the size of the hands, that is the longest hand. I don't know whether it will show on the camera there, but it's actually coming out to just past the first inner ring. So it does leave me a little bit of room to spare. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to remount this on the waist block, but I'm going to do what is going to be the front first of all. The first job is going to be just face this off so I've got a nice surface. And I'm going to take it off, turn it over, to then take this back to almost the thickness I want. This is the clock face I've come up with. Just put the second hand on there so you can see the size, and I just put a Sapele bung inside. The thickness on this is roughly about 4.5mm, so that is just ideal enough for the spindle of the clock movement to go through, and plenty of room to put the nut on. I'm still undecided as to how I'm going to finish this off, which is why I've not given it any sanding seal or anything like that. It's just everything has been sanded up to 400 grit so far. I want to build something else up on this segmented as well to house this, so I will go off and make up some more segmented rings. Now I've produced 3 more rings, and the Sapele was a piece that I just ripped down in half, so they are fairly small segments. The bottoms are reasonably flat on these, and I wanted to contrast that with a bit of oak, and as you can see there, it's one that was another piece of scrap from similar to what I used there. This is all jaggedy. The thinnest wall on here is 6mm, so I have to be very precise with the mounting of this to make sure that I can get a ring out of it when I turn it on the lathe. Now the biggest one, I've done these all slightly different sizes. The biggest one on here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have that so that the face sits inside it. So that will become the front, followed by the oak, and then the Sapele on the back. So this should hopefully slope inwards a little bit. Now I've mounted this in my standard C jaws, and they are at their limits, much further and they will pop out, and it's in there nice and secure, so it shouldn't go anywhere. I'm going to I'm going to have to be very, very careful here just to keep away from the jaws, but I'm going to true part of this outside up and stick a tenon on there. And I will make that a fairly small tenon, and it's just so that I can then get this turned around on the lathe to then face off the other side and then glue the next ring on. Now, because this holds the jaws like this, what I may well do then is also mount these, both of these on there as well. I then should have something fairly even to put these on when I glue them in place, especially if I true up the outsides a bit. They're going to be far easier to line up to glue on. I'm just going to use my Ashley Isles 12mm spindle gouge here. So just to make sure I'm totally flat there, what I'm going to do, first of all, cover this with chalk, and then just use my sanding disc. And if there's no signs of chalk, which there isn't, that should now be totally flat. So those two rings are now ready. I will just go off and repair this one and come back when I have this mounted in the larger jaws. The oak ring has now been glued up, just waiting for the glue to set. I've now got my largest jaws in here, and you can hopefully see on the camera there the gap that I've got in there. So it's not ideal for this, but so it's light work, and I just want to true up the outside here now and make sure I've got a flat surface on here to then glue the oak ring on. And I've actually got all the clearance I should need on the inside, so I might even true up some of the inside as well. This was glued up about 3 hours ago now, 2-3 hours ago, so it should be quite secure. Just going to true up this inside bit here and then create a mortise inside here so that I can put my normal jaws on here in expansion mode. I'm just going to use my Ashley Isles 9mm spindle gouge, and the reason for that is because it's got such an acute angle on it. It means that I can just have the tool in at a sensible angle rather than having to be across like that. Now this outside rim and the inside I've now sanded to 320, sanding sealer, Yorkshire Grit, Woodwax 22 and Microcrystaline Wax. I've been quite fortunate here that the recess that I put on the back here still just fits into my large jaws. Now there's only about a wall thickness of about 3mm there, so I'm just having to be careful not to over tighten this. Now my first job here is to do a recess to fit the clock face in. Right, that now fits in there fine. I can now slowly shape this top and bring down the sides. Right, the shaping on this is now finished. The walls on this are extremely thin at some points, we're probably down to about a couple of mil. So I'm now going to go off and sand this up, and I'll give it the same treatment as I gave on the inside there. So it'll be sanded to 320, sanding sealer, Yorkshire Grit, Woodwax 22 and Microcrystaline Wax. Now I've decided to do some topography for the clock face, and I don't know whether it actually shows there on the camera what I've penciled in. I've just basically penciled in the numbers 12, 3, 6 and 9 and just put some lines between the others, and I'm just going to do that with my Peter Childs topography pen. Now that's the actual clock face now with the ring. That's all been polished up. That needs to be glued into there, and then I can then polish this all up. Right, to drill this hole for the stem as accurate as possible, first of all I've brought up the tailstock and I've used that as a reference point for where I rest my drill bit on the tool rest so that it's at the same height. So I've made myself a segmented ring here, another 12p segmented ring. This is going to be the very base of the stand. So I'm going to true this up. I've just got it between centres at the minute. Put a tenon on the bottom so I can turn around and get it into my smaller jaws. At the same time, for the stem I have glued this together, and again I'm going to stick this between centres, true the whole thing up, and again so I can again hold this in the jaws. But what I'm also going to do is, this piece of sapele in here is fairly central, but when I put the centre in, I'm actually going to put it slightly off centre, because I don't want the sapele straight through the centre like that. I want it offset a bit. Well, I have to say this has actually been quite a long project to get through. It's my first time of doing a clock like this on this sort of size, and I think almost everything was done out of scrap and off cuts of wood, so nothing special bought there. I mean, especially the oak. The oak was literally scraps of wood like that, which were off cuts. Now in the end, as you probably noticed, I didn't bother going for a back. I hummed and hawed, but thought that if the clock's standing like this, It's going to be up against the wall, really no point in doing it, and it's going to allow easy access to the back and everything. I think had I done a lot thicker segments, then I would have probably built some form of a back on there, because at least that way I could have built a latch in. But I thought that, especially with the thickness of this, that if I put something in there, I'm going to have to probably go in there with a Dremel or something to create some notches, and I just thought it's just going to mess the whole thing up. I mean, I've learned a few things about doing this. There's a few things I change. As I said, to start with, it's probably with the thicker segments. It is extremely light. The other thing I change, I mean, I like the idea of the segmented base, but I think, especially with the size of the clock face, it could really do with being wider. And what I did like though was, and as you'll hopefully have seen on there, is this is why I offset the centre a bit on this Sapele insert. I absolutely love the way it's come through the front there, and it's plain on the back. The face looks fairly pale to the rest of the clock. I would probably want to do something different to that. Now, hopefully this has given you some ideas. Again, another one of my projects really with scrap woods. Now, I know it's not perfect. As I've already pointed out, one or two little things I would change. Whether you like it or not, perhaps you could just list below in the comments, even if it's just one thing that you would change if you did it yourself. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next project video.